Hello interwebs, I hope you are doing well. For today's video, I just want to kind of take this video to gush about a little gem of a show that I am going to highly recommend and encourage you all watch, and that is the show Infinity Train. I was recommended this show on the recommendation of my friend Vera Wild, who is the YouTuber Council of Geeks. She saw the first season of the show and said, you need to watch this, you will really enjoy it, and oh boy, was she absolutely right. So for this video, I'm going to be reviewing just the first season here, and I'm going to stay mostly spoiler-free for the first half of this, and then I'll get a little bit into spoilers towards the end of this video, but I mostly just want this to be a gush fest and recommendation, just to encourage all of you to go out and watch this show, especially considering how low of an investment this show is. It is just so incredibly worth your time if you are someone who likes animation, likes really emotional tales, likes interesting mysteries, like interesting settings, likes characters who learn and develop and grow really thoughtfully over time, and yet don't have a lot of time to invest in really long form shows, because this show is very bite-sized and short. Each episode is only 10 minutes long, and each season is only 10 episodes, and while I've only seen the first season at the time of this review, I know that each season kind of tells its own storyline, with like certain characters and events and the setting being the same, but it really kind of is its own anthology series focusing on each individual thing. So really each season is kind of like its own movie. It's only about, 100 minutes, which is about like feature film length. So if you just want to sit down and watch like a movie that feels kind of episodic but still tells one continuous story, this show is honestly a perfect bite-sized thing for that. But enough about me talking about the structure. What actually is this show? The basic concept of this show is, and it's hard to describe it too much because a lot of this first season is kind of there to build out the mystery of what this world is and how it's structured. So I have to kind of stay a little bit obfuscating of it a little bit. But basically, you meet this character of Tulip, whose parents are going through a divorce. And it's, for any child going through a divorce, she's understandably going through a lot herself. She doesn't really understand why her parents can't stay together, why they've sort of fallen out of love with each other. And it's really, it's rough for her. I mean, I am also a child of divorce as well. And so a lot of that sort of speaks to me as sort of like you're seeing your world sort of fall apart in front of you, this thing that everyone else has and that you're now sort of seeing falling apart. And so as a result, she sort of runs away from home, and as she runs away from home, she encounters this mysterious train, this Infinity Train, and she goes on the train, and she starts to find that each train car is full of whatever it can be. It can be a whole world inside a singular train car. Like in one, she finds a beach, and in one, she finds a Greek-like world that is inhabited only by corgis. It's just random assortments of things that she finds in each car, and so now she's stuck on this car because she can't escape the train, and so she's trying to find the conductor in order to get off this train. And then on top of that, there's this added little mystery of there's this number on her hand that keeps going up or down, and she doesn't know why. So a lot of this mystery is, what is this train? What is this number? Where is the conductor? How is this world structured? What does this all mean? While also at the same time, her sort of dealing with her own internal struggle of her having, dealing with her parents becoming divorced. And that's sort of the weird structure of this, with each episode sort of like building up the mystery of that, building up the mystery of her progressing forward in this train, kind of going through these cars to try and find the conductor, asking these questions of the world. But really what this show really is more about is each car, each train, each episode is sort of progressing her through this, her sort of own emotional turmoil of dealing with divorce and kind of like having her work it out. And so each episode is like this little morality tale of someone progressing through their own sort of trauma, may not be the wrong word, but their own sort of like baggage that they're trying to work out. And that was just so fascinating and wonderful. And again, I don't want to spoil too much of how this world is built out, but it all coalesces in a really satisfying way. And there's this wonderful air of mystery and honestly kind of creepiness, but it never feels like, the show is never horror, but there's a kind of scariness edge to it, a bit of like underlying tension to this whole sort of thing going on here that I really, really liked, but the show still feels fun and joyous and over the top. Like, the corgi world is a lot of fun, and I just enjoy that. The other thing, too, is the characters feel really, really well developed. The character of Tulip in this show, she is outspoken. She feels really believable. She's a likable protagonist, and yet I really bought her sort of being like a good person, but just having a lot that she's dealing with and needing to sort of work through it. And the show does handle these these issues of divorce really, really well. Again, as someone, like, I was much younger when my parents got divorced, so I sort of don't remember as much of the time when they were together. But sort of I see a lot of similar things that she's working out here, and there's some really wonderful episodes that sort of delve into that. Again, without spoiling too much, there's like a really wonderful episode where Tulip deals with her reflection, who becomes sentient, and sort of dealing with this idea of, like, we are not necessarily reflections of other people, sort of dealing with her, sort of like dealing with, like, oh, people like her parents are people too, and they have their own lives and issues that she's dealing with, and starting to have empathy for people beyond herself. That is sometimes hard for a child to sort of recognize that their parents are people too. And it's not, the show is so smart because it doesn't necessarily draw the line perfectly for you. It doesn't say, like, this is about this. This is about her recognizing her parents. And yet you can start to, if you really look at the themes underlying this, you can start to see how that sort of is like the undercurrent of this whole episode about, like, empathy, or about this whole series. And I just really like that, where the show is so much about her character development, Tulip's character development, but it doesn't necessarily beat you over the head with, this is about her dealing with this in this situation. And it's using this fantastical world to sort of deal out these sort of interesting metaphors and situations that I really just thought were so creative and inventive, but really strongly emotional as well. The characters in this as well are super fascinating. Beyond Tulip, there's one who is sort of like this little robot guy that can split in two, and there's like a sad version and a happy version of him. The sad version of him is very much like Marvin, the paranoid robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the happy one is just sort of like a happy-go-lucky guy. And so the dynamic between the two of them is really, really funny, and I really enjoy them. We also, without spoiling too much, we do get a sort of sentient animal character within this that I don't want to spoil when and where he comes in, but he's a lot of fun and deeply enjoyable. Atticus is his name, and I thought he was absolutely cute, but you really start to get invested in him, and there's some really good emotional moments with his character throughout. Like, all the characters in this show that you think might be throwaway or one note or just there for like a little bit of humor eventually also end up becoming very emotional and really fleshed out, even despite the fact that this show is so short. Like, I felt like I watched a whole season of a 20-minute show that had 20 episodes, but only in 10 minutes episodes. Like, every episode feels so compact and dense, but fun and thoughtful as well, that I deeply enjoyed it. There's also other appearances. This character appears in just the second episode, but Kate Mulgrew, Captain Janeway herself, appears as like a cat character who is super fascinating and also has her own morally dubious things here, but again is much more fleshed out than you would think a character that's like a con artist type of character would be. And so, like, any characters that initially feel one note, feel one-sided, eventually get much more depth to them. Getting a little into spoilers for this, so if you have not seen the show, I stop here and I just recommend you go watch it. It's not a lot of time investment. It's a really wonderful show, but I want to talk a little bit about some spoiler stuff that gets into the show. The villain of this piece that eventually gets revealed sort of in the latter half of the show, I think comes in a little bit too late for my taste. It's sort of just there, and I like, again, how she ultimately becomes a reflection of Tulip and sort of Tulip's trauma and issues. The conductor, as we sort of learn here, she's also someone who just could not let go of something and sort of is hanging on to this baggage in a way that Tulip has learned to sort of ultimately get over. And I liked that dynamic, but I wish she had been introduced a little bit sooner, and I think it's a little bit of more of a casualty of how short this show is, how dense it is, and while not bad, I feel like I wish it had been seeded a little bit sooner, but again, it sort of goes along with the fact that the show is so short and so fast and so condensed, and so some things have to be sacrificed in an effort of that, and I think that was something, but it is sort of something that I wish had been layered a little bit more naturally throughout the series as we progressed through it. The other thing, too, that I know I got a little bit of a spoilers for Season 2, that this gets addressed and sort of critiqued and criticized and sort of more fleshed out in Season 2, which I appreciated. I love it when world building builds upon itself. But within this season of itself, I'm just reviewing the first season, we ultimately learn that the numbers on Tulip's hand are about her emotional progression through sort of dealing with her baggage around her parents and her divorce. And that people and passengers on this train get this number, and eventually once the number reaches 0, they're able to escape the train. And that's, they get to 0 when they sort of have their emotional catharsis and sort of recognize the thing that they're working through in their life. And the number can go up or down, and they can eventually even go backwards, and the numbers can even grow beyond just the number on their hand that they started with, if they really sort of backpedal and aren't really dealing with this. And I think that's a cool idea. It's a nice little interesting metaphor for, you know, being able to handle stuff. And I loved the mystery of that, and I like how it's developed and eventually revealed. But it leaves me sort of wondering after the fact, it works well within this show, but it leaves me wonder after the fact the implications of that, of like reducing emotional sort of catharsis and building up to a number, feels a little bit strange, because while I do recognize, I like that the number can go back and forth, that it's not one steady straightforward progression, it is a sort of a weird metaphor and doesn't perfectly fit, because, you know, life isn't that like, oh, we have our emotional catharsis, we're at 0 and we're all good now. We finally hit that point. But that's kind of how story structures work, and I like that this sort of like, it's almost a weird critique on story structure in and of itself, of how characters move backward and forward within that and eventually have to reach an emotional catharsis. But it is an interesting sort of thing to sort of, like, I think the metaphor works within here, but it's something that does have problems when you tend to think about it. But again, as someone spoiled for me, I think Season 2 does kind of delve into that a little bit more and actually criticize the world building, which has me very excited. I love it when works of art sort of say, like, this is a piece of our world building. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of building it out if we sort of extend it beyond its initial usage and its purpose in the plot? And I think that's really cool and has me excited to get into Season 2 of this show. So ultimately, at the end of the day, Infinity Train Season 1 is a fantastic show. I deeply loved it, and I cannot recommend it enough to all of you if you have not seen it. Again, it's a very low in time investment, but it is a really wonderful emotional investment to put into this show, and I cannot recommend it enough. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you have seen it, I'd love to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you think about Infinity Train Season 1. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I have a Patreon that you can help me out on. I have another channel, Jessie, where I do more video essay stuff, long form stuff, bigger videos than just my reviews. But this channel is mostly reviews. So thank you so much for watching. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.